But she went as far as writing essays about me to her professors, trashing my car, involving others in on the hate train to Christina by stealing my laundry and throwing it in the dumpster. Whew, that first year. This small town country girl, as she referred to me, did not deserve to live in the big old city of New York City. Meanwhile, we were on Long Island, but I digress.
Love is a high-risk behavior.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast, High Risk for Heartbreak. I am your host, Christina, and I'm so glad you decided to join me today. Have you ever suffered from the consequences of relational upset because you desired something that they couldn't deliver, even if they didn't know? We are breaking our own hearts, expecting people to be as we be and do as we do. When I think about others' expectations of me, there's always this part of me that just wants to revert back to being little Miss Ward. And if you have tuned into any of my episodes in last season, you will know who little Miss Ward is. She is the toddler elementary school version of myself. Yes, the teachers and administrators called me Little Miss Ward, so that gives you an idea of how I showed up as a child. I find myself, though, slightly agitated when I think about Little Miss Ward. She's slightly agitated at the thought that her room should remain clean at all times, or that her hair should look the way that it did when she left the house after a long day and hard play at school. Very, very serious playground business was happening. She's slightly agitated that you're waiting for her to fulfill your expectations like some covenant was made between us. She just becomes agitated at other people's unspoken, unmet expectations of me. Now, certainly I'm not alone in thinking this. We can think back to times when people have expected something of us and we're like, why did you expect that of me? You never even said anything. Others' expectations can sometimes feel like judgment, particularly when, well, they expect it without communicating that they expect it. The reverse of that is our unspoken expectations of others can feel to us like common sense. Isn't that funny? But I guess common sense ain't that common, and judgment, well, maybe it isn't judgment after all. There are many things in this world that are black and white, and of course, many others that are gray. That's just my belief. Sometimes it seems that expectations created within relationships function on this black and white scale, though. They function on this black and white spectrum, leaving very little room for error, very little room for correction and atonement, and so forth. Unmet expectations more often than not feel like paper cuts that just won't heal. Each unmet desire reopening a wound of disappointment each and every time. In my opinion, a very small sample of experience of unmet expectations happening in relationships around me. It's very, very small, micro. It doesn't actually matter if communication is king and the person that you're doing a relationship with understands what you want. If the expectations go unmet, it hurts the same as if they never knew. When I was in university, and I may have told this story before, I'm pretty sure I told it on my last season, I had this roommate in my first year who absolutely hated me. This girl hated me, okay? I won't say her name, but it's very close to mine. Take a guess. I couldn't understand, though, her distaste for me. I mean, after all, I loved me, and others seemed to love me as well. I would be nice to her. I would be kind to her, inviting her along with myself and my other roommates out to eat. We would go to our little, we called it Winnick. We'd go to our little, what's it called? You know, the little eatery place that they have on college campuses. We would go to the gym together. We go to events and everything, go out to the movies. And it, as always, we were met with decline. It's like, I couldn't understand why this girl said no every single time. Who wouldn't want to go get a smoothie? Who wouldn't want to get a smoothie after the gym? Who wouldn't want to get a protein smoothie after the gym? Come on, let's be for real. But she went as far as writing essays about me to her professors, trashing my car, involving others in on the hate train to Christina by stealing my laundry and throwing it in the dumpster. Whew, that first year. This small town country girl, as she referred to me, did not deserve to live in the big old city of New York City. Meanwhile, we were on Long Island, but I digress. She did not like me. In fact, I could chalk this up as hate because I had never experienced anyone in my life actively and blatantly try to hurt me with the exception of her. And still, and it's still not. And if they are, they're not telling the truth. The thing that made this hardest to accept for me was I was actually really nice to her. I was really kind to her, and I could not understand why the kindness that I was sowing I was not also reaping that from her. My mind was fixed on her unkindness being this very strange and very opposite, but not equal reaction to my treatment of her. I couldn't understand then that my expectations were only my reality. They weren't truth. Expectations are not reality. They are our personal and subjective truth. Opinion may be a better word to say, or maybe belief. I believed that my roommate should have been kind to me because I was kind to her. And it hurt me that she did not also believe that she should be kind in return. My expectations of her were unmet. Now, I know they weren't founded on anything other than my personal values, which obviously would not have been reflected in her because she has her own set of values and beliefs and her own moral compass that she grew up with. We didn't grow up in the same household. We're not sisters. We weren't friends for lifelong. She comes from a completely different cloth than I did, and I didn't understand that then. Though, whether she was justified or not to act out of her repulsion of me is neither here nor there because she did what she did. She did what she wanted, right? And that's exactly what uncommunicated, unmet expectations are. They are a delusion that people should value, should believe, and should guide themselves the way that we do. And we wait in expectation for them to. And guess what? That leads to heartbreak. There's this term called false consensus bias, which refers to our tendency to see our own beliefs and our own behaviors as being typical and more widely agreed upon than they actually are. Have you been there? There have been many countless studies on this bias towards projection of our beliefs and behaviors on each other, as if they are actually occurring and not just a desire to change someone's mind to believe and do as you do. We see this on social media all the time. All the time, where people you follow generally have the same thoughts and beliefs as you, right? Maybe every now and again the algorithm will throw something else, throw a wrench in the equation, and you'll see somebody that believes something completely opposite of what you do. But generally, you see the things that you like and you see the things that you believe in because that's how the algorithm is curating your experience on social media. Now, a part of this that of course, it is the algorithm, like I said, but another part of this is also us desiring to be homogenous and being versus actually being diversified by the people that we surround ourselves with. So we click on the things that we like. We don't click usually on the things that we like, maybe not ad nauseum. We more often than not are going to click on the things that we like and surround ourselves with people that have similar thoughts and beliefs versus diversified thoughts and beliefs because that might shake something up in us. But another part of that phenomenon is also called the echo chamber. We prefer to hear what is echoed back to us as opposed to anything that might challenge our general beliefs and behaviors. And we truly believe everyone should be like us. That's what I was doing. With my old roommate, I almost said her name. With my old roommate, I believe, listen, I'm kind. You should be kind too. I don't understand why you wouldn't be. Other people are kind to me. What's wrong with you? And therein lies the source of your heartbreak. The need for people that you are in relationship with to agree with your expectations, especially without being informed, is a personal setup for heartbreak. I just want you to know. So today I want to explore the undoing we encounter when our expectations go unmet in our relationships, whether estranged or close. So let's relate. Have you ever tried communicating your expectations to another person? Perhaps you work in leadership and it's your job to make sure your team is not only informed of your expectations, but that they fulfill them. And that this is the largest part of your role, of course, as a leader, is to make sure that the expectations are fulfilled. And for many years, I worked in retail and in leadership, styling and merchandising for a couple Fortune 500 companies. And it was my job to make sure that my boss's expectations were not only understood, but performed to the same codified degree as every other identical store to us, despite the location. We had to be identical across the board. And we had to make sure that the customers' purchasing behaviors and similar demographics, though they varied, we performed the same as the other stores, if not better. I was expected to perform, and I was told so. I also had a team that was expected to perform in physical labor what I was mostly expected to perform and delegate verbally. Now, I don't know about you, But have you ever tried to verbally enroll someone to do something? This is a multifold thing, you guys. You can't only tell most individuals that you want to enroll them. You have to speak to other things like expectations and deadlines and the reason for the season and their personal limitations on an individual basis. Try doing that with a revolving team of 30. 30. Right? You have to keep the morale up. You have to speak to their work ethic, and the list literally goes on. Motivating people to see things the way that you do is really not a simple task. So imagine believing people are already motivated to believe and behave like your expectations. Just imagine that. It sounds so silly when I state it like this. And when I was breaking this down, I was like, wow, I really have lived my life like this, thinking that because I believe something should be a way, they would also believe and think and expect. When I state it like this, there are very few places where we can maintain this expectation that people should just know other than romantic relationships or friendships or like our close, intimate relationships. However, in close relationships, there is this thing that we do where we desire for people to read our heart and to just know us. We sing about it in music all the time. We just want people to just know our heart. We want it to just be like, I won't say the name because I don't want to be sued. Large romantic. Oh, they have a partnership with another large company, and they used to make a lot of really romantic movies with princesses. You should know what I'm talking about. We want them to just know us because that would mean, one, less work to teach them or enroll them into a relationship with us. And two, it would ruin our fantasy. It would ruin that story of kindred spirits coming together and being soulmates or whatever. And this fantastical storyline that we have secretly, but all very openly desired to have. We have somehow come to believe that that is how relationships are acquired and maintained, through expectations and just knowing them. I have personally experienced something close to this, kindred spirits, because the person that I was in a relationship was so similar to me that we more often than not saw things in the world the same way. We all deserve to have those people in our lives. I do believe that. And I'm not saying that every person has to be completely opposite of you. We all deserve to have those people in our lives, but let's be actually realistic about the expectation of only keeping company who mirrors us versus the company that will hold the mirror up to us. I want to define expectation clearly so that you aren't expecting something else from me. We now know that expectation is not truth. They are beliefs. Expectations are beliefs and opinions that could be true, but not because they come from us, but because they are true. They are often subjective. They aren't consensus. Expectations are defined as strong beliefs that something will happen or be in the case in the future, right? Expectations are assuming and hopeful. They are eager and prospective. Expectations really seem like a beautiful thing. And honestly, I think that they are in context. They give us motivation for a future to an end, sort of like the scripture that says, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." That's Jeremiah 29:11 for those who don't know. Unlike our uncommunicated expectations, the Lord, through this scripture, makes it very clear of his plans. He communicates what they are not and follows with what they are. This order of communication, I find in sticky situations, is really helpful because both are clearly defined, and because of that, nothing is left up to interpretation. It's my belief that expectations come from a place of wanting for yourself what you cannot control. The etymological breakdown of the word expectation is expectar or expectare, which means to wait and to look out. Ex meaning thoroughly, and spectar meaning to thoroughly look out for what is to come. That to me just has such an air of hope and positivity to it that we are looking with great hope for that which we cannot control, and we believe it will come. We are embracing that which has not even been synthesized. Truthfully, that's what faith is. It's a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen, Hebrews 11:1. So how do we go wrong expecting from others what we do for ourselves in the intrinsic nature of expectation, which is hopeful? I think the tainting of expectations comes from a hope for uncommunicated needs to be met from a place of intrinsic motivation versus them being met by way of the need to be communicated. In other words, we expect people to be motivated to do the things that we want them to do without communicating it to them. In other words, as I stated earlier, many of us just believe people should know us well enough to know our needs without them being communicated, as if they, by way of association to us, can just telepathically understand us and deliver evidence of their understanding by doing the thing. It's a beautiful thought, listen. And it does happen. There are people who can do that. But I think in most cases, it's not true, right? Most cases, people aren't doing that. In some cases, maybe they are. You've been in a relationship with someone who just gets you and you can read your mind, and there's nothing better than that, truthfully. And I guess to some degree, we are all equipped to do that with someone in some way. We can see something is off about a person from one day to the next, or sense when the nature of someone shifts because of upset. We can clock it. And I agree with that. What I'm really getting at more than anything, though, is the response to someone not being able to do that, to clock you. It's very egocentric of us to think that our perspective is the perspective, so that others should just know it. Like my example earlier of my old roommate, my perspective was that she should just get me. She should just treat me kindly because she should just know I'm coming from a place of kindness, and what I was doing for her and the invites and all of that stuff. She should just know that I was doing it from my heart. And I want to share with you 3 responsibilities of why she wouldn't have known that, but 3 responsibilities, truthfully, that I take now when it comes to expectations of others that I am in a relationship with. The first one is enrollment. So we talked about this earlier. To save myself and for you to save yourself from any unnecessary heartbreak that comes from lack of enrollment, you have to be able to communicate what you want. First, that means you must know what you want, where that desire comes from, and if it's even reasonable. Right? Sometimes we want people to do things that is not reasonable. So I'm taking accountability over my desires, understanding that ultimately my desires are my opinion, though they may be truthful to me, right? They may be truthful to me. They may not actually be truthful for the next person. And because of that, they may be unreasonable. And that leads me to number 2, give space for their fulfillment of the expectation. I have to give others a chance to fulfill my expectations after I've communicated them, right? Once I've communicated them, then I wait and see. In order for someone to meet my expectation, they need a chance to do so. I think often we blow past this. We keep an expectation secret, thinking that they should know. And then if it's not performed, we punish them for the unspoken rule, or worse, exile them from our lives altogether, because it's like, oh, you should have just known. That's like common sense. But remember, like I said, common sense is not that common, especially if the sense that you are trying to communicate, you're not communicating. So now I'm speaking specifically to the need here when it comes to expectations. These chances don't include respect and safety, which I think, if violated, are not something that should be negotiated, of course. What I'm really speaking to is more acutely is like, I expect my roommate to wash the dishes they make. Okay? Communicate that and then wait for them to fulfill that. Now, should it be common sense that if you make a dish, you clean the dish? Yeah, but you're in a roommate situation, oftentimes coming, into this situation with people who aren't coming from the same background as you. So if you don't set it up, you're going to set yourself up. Right? The third thing that I want to say is use wisdom. In a prior episode, I discussed that wisdom is knowledge plus the proper application of that knowledge, which equals wisdom. I used wisdom to measure what should be next for that relationship. When I communicated to my hypothetical roommate that I expect the dishes to be washed that they made because I wash the dishes I make, then I have given them a chance to meet the expectation, and they positively respond or not. And then I can see what the needs are from there. If they don't respond to the expectation that I communicated, I use wisdom to decide if I can continue to healthily function in that relationship. Now, this particular scenario, obviously, that would be ridiculous if you're like, I can't have this relationship because you didn't wash a dish. Now, if it's 6 months, 12 months down the line, it might be time to make that consideration. But sometimes people need to be reminded a few 40 times, right? That may look like reminders, right? So we need to remind them. We need to give them more chances and have a bit more grace, especially if it's a habit change, depending on the severity, of course, of the expectation. Now, when it comes to more personal relationships and intimate relationships, if there are certain needs that are not being fulfilled that have been early communicated and have been agreed upon, then obviously it may not take 40 chances, right? So you have to enroll people. You have to give them space to fulfill whatever it is that you talk to them about, whatever you're expecting. And then you have to use wisdom with them in handling how and where that relationship goes from there. So in closing, I shared with you guys ways in which I approach managing my heartbreak around unmet expectations so that I can kind of mitigate some of that heartbreak. And I do want to leave you with this quote that highlights the responsibility that I think we all have within our relationships with others. It says that if your happiness is dependent on your ability to get someone to meet your level of expectations, then you are destined for a life of unhappiness. I hope that makes sense to you. That's by Ken Korkow. I'll put his name up here. Our happiness ultimately cannot be contingent on what we believe others should and will do for us. We can and will consistently betray ourselves that way. We are to expect nothing, not even from our enemies, and give without the need to receive what we gave. Chasing expectations in others is an unnecessary risk, and it is a game that we don't need to necessarily play. If you're not communicating to them with love, enrolling them with intention, and giving people a chance to fulfill that, you are setting yourself up for unnecessary heartbreak. Interdependence is necessary for a healthy relationship of any kind, and I think that type of relating requires you to communicate your desires, knowing that they may be unreasonable. And it doesn't mean people won't fulfill the unreasonable, but we won't know if they're unreasonable unless we communicate them. So don't be unreasonable, but if you are, communicate it at least. I love you guys. Thank you for loving yourself first so you can then go and love your neighbor. Until next time.
Why don't you stay a little longer? You like what you like, right? Subscribe to the channel so we can spend a little more time together, and maybe comment your thoughts because I care what you're thinking. Love is the risk and the reward.